Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we're learning Kiddushin, page 50, which discusses a very interesting concept. The Talmud says that we are not mind readers, or using the language of the Gemara, Devarim shebalev enu devarim, that what is in your mind or in your heart, that does not count. It does not have any legal bearing. So even though you're, for example, engaged in some type of transaction, and in your mind you thought, I'm only going to allow this to take place under these circumstances, but you never stipulated them, and those things didn't take place, it doesn't matter. It's still a valid sale. The transaction still is valid. It's not voided because we don't know what's going on in your mind. If you would have expressed yourself, that would be one thing. And on this, the Talmud tries to derive proof to this concept, that what's in our minds and what's in our hearts is not the same as what we say. And I'd like to share with you two attempts to prove this. One has to do with sacrifices. In the time of the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, there were karbanos, and some of them were voluntary. A person could make a vow to say they were going to bring a sacrifice, and they were obligated to do so within a certain period of time. Now, the Talmud actually says that this person must bring it, to the extent that we will even force them to do so. And yet, another verse says we're not really allowed to force someone. It has to be coming willingly. So on this, we say the famous expression that kofanoso ad shiyoim erotza ani, that we could force a person until that person finally says, yes, I want to do it. So to speak, twisting their arm until they say uncle, and then eventually they say, okay, I'll do it. On this, the Talmud said, this must be a proof, because it's clear that even though they're going through the actions of bringing a sacrifice, they really didn't want to do it unless they were being forced to. And on this, the Talmud tells us that when it comes to this situation, the person really does want to be achieving atonement for having brought this sacrifice, which is something which is good for him. And therefore, they just needed a little bit of a push. But the reality is that this is what they really wanted to. I'm going to come back to that. And also, under certain circumstances, a man can be forced by the courts to give his wife a divorce, a get. And again, even though he's not supposed to be giving it to her against his will, but again, we apply this concept that we could force him until he willingly does it. And on this, again, is not a proof, because the Talmud says, because it's a mitzvah to listen to the courts. It's a mitzvah to listen to the sages. It's a mitzvah to follow and to do the right thing. And therefore, the idea behind this, and what we can apply in our lives, is that sometimes, initially, we may have certain desires to do things, and they're not really good for us. And we have people that will encourage us to do the right thing. The reality is, deep in our hearts, in our deepest parts of our mind, we know what's right. We know what we're supposed to do. Sometimes, for whatever reason, based on temptations or even as strong as an addiction, we end up doing things which are just detrimental, which are not good for us. And therefore, we need other people sometimes, loved ones, people to inspire us, people who motivate and push us, for us to do things that maybe we wouldn't really do ourselves on our own. But it doesn't mean that they're forcing me to do something in which is totally against my will. I really want to be a good person. I really want to do the right thing. I really don't want to harm person. But at the same time, unfortunately, because of life gets complicated. And this is an important concept in general. When it comes to relationships, communication is the key. And you need to be able to articulate and to speak what exactly you want in a relationship. When it comes to the most intimate of relationships, of that of a husband and a wife, a lot of the issues are not necessarily on the things that are said, but things that are not said, things that are implied, things that are meant to be understood. How come he doesn't know me? Well, the reality is you need to maybe be a better communicator. He may need to be a better listener, and vice versa. But the reality is, to expect someone to just understand what you're thinking, the Talmud says that is not something which is realistic.